Hi, this is Brian O'Day, executive producer of Creepy Canada at creepycanada.com. Hey, Rob, we want to wish you and all the members of X Zone Nation a real Merry Christmas and a terrific New Year. Make it a spooky one, folks.
Find you. Why have you gone off?
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Doing that thing you do, breaking my heart into a million pieces, like you always do. And you don't mean to be cruel. You never even knew about the heartache I've been going through. Well, I try to forget you, girl. It's just so hard to do. Every time you do that thing you do.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next hour, I will be your host and your guide as together we will cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern, right here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220. And we're streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. Now, if you'd like to send me an email, if you have any comment, guest suggestions, or if you need help in a paranormal situation and you just don't know who to go to, send me an email. I'll be glad to help you out at xzone@classic1220.ca. X-Zone Nation, my guest this hour is LOYD AUERBACH, and I've had the pleasure of knowing LOYD for a number of years now. He's world recognized as a paranormal expert and parapsychologist. He has 43 years plus investigating the paranormal and over 40 years teaching courses in parapsychology. With thousands of media appearances, he is the director of the Office of Paranormal Investigations, president of the Forever Family Foundation, an adjunct professor at Atlantic University, and is the director of the board of directors of the Ryan Research Center, where he teaches courses online in parapsychology. Joining me now is LOYD AUERBACH. And LOYD, welcome back to the X Zone. Always great speaking to you. How have you been, my friend?
Been very good, Rob. Thank you, and it's great to be back.
So tell me, is there anything new, thrilling, and exciting in the world of parapsychology?
That's a really good question. I think that we're just kind of plodding along with our research for the most part. Mm-hmm. There's some really interesting research going on at the Ryan Center these days, and some continued research, of course, looking at life after death with mediums. Robert Bigelow, Bigelow Consciousness, Institute of Conscious Studies, has money out again, this time for research, for a number of researchers doing things. So those are really the high points, other than the continued existence and activity of the Society for Psychical Research over in the UK.
LOYD, how did you become interested in parapsychology?
It was partly because of my interest as a kid in science and in folklore, and influence from pop culture, mainly television, comic books, and science fiction. I discovered books in the library about the science books on parapsychology probably when I was about 12 years old, after hearing the word used on the TV show Dark Shadows.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the Dewey Decimal System has the same section. The 133 section has parapsychology books, both more popular, but also the science books. Also has books on vampires and werewolves and witches too. So it's kind of an interesting area to go to when it comes down to it.
LOYD, what is your main focus of your research in parapsychology?
So these days, I'm more an educator than I am a researcher, but my focus has been mainly field work. So working with people who report apparitions, hauntings, poltergeist phenomena, or even just talking to them about their extrasensory perception experiences, their psychic experiences in general. So those have been the main things that I've really been working on the last few years for research.
Lloyd,
I also work a lot with mediums because of the Forever Family Foundation.
are reports up or down when it comes to experiences that people are having within the realm of the paranormal?
Well, I think to places like the Rhine and the Society for Psychical Research, they're pretty much they're pretty much the same. They're pretty much steady. We don't really get stats from ghost hunting groups, and there's over 3,000 of them in North America alone. So we don't ever hear that. Most of those groups have unfortunately don't even know that they're connected to our field, to parapsychology. They think they're in their own field, off on their own. And I guess you could put them out in left field in some respects.
Something I've noticed about the ghost hunting groups is that they don't communicate or share information that they discover.
No, they really don't, unless there happen to be, somebody from their group happens to get booked as a speaker at one of the conferences, the ghost conferences.
Well, it seems to me that they're defeating their own purpose, because I know as a former law enforcement officer, the best way to crack a case is by sharing information within the law enforcement community. So why wouldn't they share the information?
Well, you have to look at why most of them actually get into it. A lot of them, and this is not everybody for sure. I mean, we do have a trickle coming from the ghost hunting world to taking courses at the Rhine Center, or folks taking other online courses offered by folks in the UK. But it's a small trickle. Most of them, I think, are mimicking what they see on TV. They get very excited by their EVPs and other so-called evidence without ever knowing even how to assess that. But it's an experiential thing for them. They're having an experience, and they really can't have the experience necessarily with the ghost. So they have an experience with their so-called evidence. And that becomes the key piece for them. A lot of them are hobbyists. I know somebody called a lot of these folks paranormal tourists. But they're, I talk to some of them sometimes, and I wonder why in the world are they not considering the why? Why are things happening?
Yeah.
And the how are things happening?
Exonation, our guest this hour is Lloyd Auerbach, and Lloyd is one of the originals when it comes to people who have come on radio, television, media articles to try and explain what parapsychology is and how parapsychology is all part of the existence of the world that we live in. And Lloyd is my guest this hour here on the X-Zone Radio Show on Classic 1220. Lloyd, can you explain to us the concept of PSI and how it relates to parapsychology?
Sure, and it's not actually an acronym. It's the Greek letter psi. Just like alpha or omega, those are Greek letters also. So psi, which represents psyche, or the mind, was the term, kind of the overarching term that J.B. Rhine kind of hit upon in the 1930s at the Duke Parapsychology Lab. He wanted something a little cleaner than what had been used before, and it really, for us, psi phenomena and experiences cover experiences of information without the use of the normal senses. We call it extrasensory perception, which is really not a sense. It's not the sixth sense. It's perception. It's non-sensory perception. We talk about psychokinesis, or mind-matter interaction, mind over matter.
Yeah.
Actually, it's also mind and energy, too. And then the evidence for survival of bodily death. The consciousness itself can reach out beyond the body and actually potentially survive the death of the body and provide an interaction for us.
How is that research coming on near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences?
Well, there's significant research on near-death experiences going on, pretty much from a lot of different fields. Of course, there are folks in the more materialist end of science who are trying to figure out why people have these experiences from a very materialist perspective, just brain-centric perspective. And they're having a hard time with some of the real cases that we deal with, the ones that have the qualities that we would call a true near-death experience. Out-of-body experiences do happen in near-death experiences, and some of them can provide verifiable information. There's not a lot of specific research in the laboratory going on with OBEs right now, though. It's not a funded thing you'll find in most places.
How do you, as a parapsychologist, look and quantify what is a real NDE and what is not?
So we have kind of a checklist. I think Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia has probably created the best checklist. There are certain constituents that consider, we would put it into a psychic, consciousness-related NDE versus a brain-centric experience. So one of the things, first of all, of course, you need to be with lower activity of the body. So when we talk about near death, the person's not actually dead. Dean Radin likes to talk about somebody whose heart stops, you're dead. Your brain has no activity, you're dead, and then nothing happens to your body. There's nothing, you can't be perhaps resuscitated. That's being triply dead in some respects. But for the constituents, we look at the experience of, and there may be, I'm not going to go over all 15, but there's some that are kind of common to folks. It's fairly common for folks to have some form of out-of-body experience in this process, to look down upon themselves from above, sometimes seeing paramedics or surgeons or other folks working on their body to resuscitate them. That's not going to happen all the time, but that does happen to a large number of these folks. There is a common experience of going through either a tunnel towards a light, or in some cultures around the world, people actually go across a bridge, across a little stream or river,
right,
and there's a rose garden there. In both circumstances, some entity, consciousness, someone they knew, is waiting for them. It may just be a voice. It may be an ancestor spirit for folks who in Asian countries. It may be your deceased parents or somebody you know in other ways. And some people talk about it being some form of God. And they get this idea, this is something that's very, very common, is that they're filled with this sense that they know so much more than they do in the physical body. And then they are either told to go back, that it's not their time, or they are asked if they want to go back. And of course, we only hear from the ones that actually come back in that circumstance. Yeah. What we do find is after the fact, people remember having had the sense of knowing everything or knowing so much more, but they can't remember what the specifics are. They also have often a change in personality, or certainly a change in perspective, which is not necessarily a psychic thing. You died and you came back, so you're going to change your philosophy anyway, most of the time. But this kind of change of outlook and how you relate to the world and what you think about death, it affects people very, very deeply. But not everybody who has a near-death experience, just the people who kind of fall into the checklist, you might say.
Why do you think that? I'm going to ask you this question when we come back, because I've only got about a minute before I have to take my break. So the question I'm going to ask you to answer when we come back is, where does reincarnation fit into the realm of near-death experience and death itself? Exonation, my guest this hour is Lloyd AUERBACH, and it's going to be an interesting hour. If you'd like to visit our website, exoneradiotv.com. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@classic1220.ca. And this is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streaming around the world on classic1220.ca. Lloyd AUERBACH and I will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
My name is Michael Telstar.
This is Psychic Dorothy.
Hello, my name is Holly Reeve.
This is Ken Elliott.
Hi, this is Patrick Cross.
This is Les Corey.
This is John Hogue.
Hi, this is Eric Rawls.
Hi, this is Blade Runner.
Hi, I'm Laura Sabrin.
I'm Craig Lewis.
My name is Lady Ashley.
Hey, you! This is Rick Emerson, and you're listening to the X Zone with Rob McConnell.
And a happy New Year.
I'm singing to the world. It's time we let the spirit come in. Let it come on in. I'm singing to the world. Everybody's caught in the spin. Look at where we've been. We've been running around year after year, blinded with pride, blinded with fear. But it's daybreak.
Lloyd Auerbach is my special guest of this hour, Exonation, and we're talking about everything within the realm of the world of parapsychology. And this is the X-Zone on Classic 1220, streaming around the world on classic1220.ca. Lloyd, before we went to the break, I asked you a question about reincarnation. Where does reincarnation fit into, if any place, in the world of parapsychology and the investigation into death?
Well, reincarnation is the idea, of course, that our consciousness can be reborn. Mm-hmm. It's believed by over 1.5 billion people on the planet in some way, shape, or form. And we have cases that have been investigated going back to the 1960s, actually starting around 1960, of children who remember previous lives, some of which are extraordinarily specific with information that can to track down the previous personality. So where it fits within our realm of parapsychology is under the heading of survival of bodily death, that something about that personality has survived the death of the body and is now in someone else. Whether that is, we stay away as much as we can from the idea of the religious term, which is soul. Unfortunately, right. Soul typically has religious connotations. But we don't know what's reborn in that sense. We don't know whether it's consciousness, actually the spirit being reborn, or whether there's some connection to memory. But it's a really fascinating phenomenon that we do, the folks at the University of Virginia especially have been looking into since 1960.
I understand that there are some people who are into the investigation of reincarnation, believe that it may have something to do with the DNA of the person.
Yeah, that would work fine if there was a familial connection between the current person and the previous person, but that's not the case in so many of these circumstances. I mean, you'd have to be reincarnated in the direct family line, and there has to be DNA passed down directly with the memory of that person, assuming that DNA actually captured the memory at all.
Right.
And that's not the case. That's not what we see in most of these circumstances.
It is a fascinating subject, and I'm sure that you and other researchers are trying your very best to uncover this mystery as well as answer questions to the many others that you're faced with. What are some of the main theories or models used in parapsychological research?
Well, I'll just say right off the bat that we are at a situation with our field where we don't have a central theory. We don't even know if ESP and PK psychokinesis are connected as two sides of the same coin, or if they're connected in that way. But one of the models right now that's been emerging relates to consciousness studies and consciousness research in general, that our experience with pulling information from the world around us is something called non-local consciousness, that our consciousness may or may not be generated by the brain, may or may not reside wholly inside our heads. There's a lot of theories in general about consciousness itself, but that our consciousness is capable of plucking information from the world around us and from other people. And we're not sure exactly how the process works. Some folks look to the quantum world for that. Mm-hmm. Others are concerned about the fact that, well, how does the information get that small, and then how does it kind of scale back up? And how do we pick up that kind of thing? Until we know what consciousness is, we're kind of stuck. With psychokinesis, we sometimes can detect the motive force for something moving, and then that person might attempt to move something again, and that detectable motive force is missing. So it's almost as if there's a process of a random process of whatever the easiest thing is to move something with intention seems to be the one that's working in that moment, whether we look for it or not.
Lloyd,
it's all about consciousness, though.
Lloyd, have you personally encountered any paranormal phenomenon during your research?
A lot, quite a bit over the years.
What has been the most significant?
Well, for me, some of the most significant has been actually, there's two areas. One has been psychokinesis, working with a gent back in the 90s by the name of Martin Caden, who was a science and science fiction writer. He was an aeronautics expert and actually an aerospace consultant. He was actually a consultant to NASA, in fact. And Marty, if anybody recognizes that name, it's maybe because you read some of his science fiction, including a book called Cyborg, which was the basis of the $6 Million Man. He wrote a book called Marooned back in the 60s, which pretty much predicted the Apollo 13 disaster. It was made into an Academy Award-winning film with Gregory Peck. So Marty had been around for a long time, and he was capable of moving small objects under very controlled conditions. I'm not the only one who worked with him. He actually worked with a bunch of guys from NASA and a number of other folks who, while they didn't publish anything because they were, NASA guys on their own time looking at what he could do, it was pretty impressive to see what he was able to do. And we even learned how to teach other people to do it on a limited basis. So that's pretty special. Some of the mediumship that I've witnessed, some of the evidential mediumship I've witnessed has been incredibly rich with information they could not have known, but not even factual information. It's some of the personality context. A medium would say something like, your dad used to, he had a certain limp that he had, and the person would then imitate that, and then would say something like, he also used to use this phrase as part of his conversation when he was frustrated. So you get these little things that you would never find. I mean, I suppose now we're going to have a generation going forward as people die off who are much younger today. They're all on TikTok. Their lives are open books. So all that information will be out there.
Lloyd, how do you distinguish between genuine paranormal experiences and hoaxes or misinterpretations?
Well, for one thing, we have patterns that we've noticed over the last 140 plus years in our field. There are very clear patterns in how people experience things. There are some outliers, of course, but there are patterns in what people experience and how they experience them, and sometimes how it affects them. There are some clear influences we get sometimes when people are telling a story. It's like their interpretation of the experience might be more related to pop culture, but if you ask them a few questions, you actually get to the heart of it. And we look for those things that are falling into the patterns, whether it is a ghost experience or an ESP experience. We see those kinds of things happening. There are certain aspects of psychic experience that just ring true when you hear the stories. And for the most part, I've exposed several phony psychics over the years. I've also found psychics and mediums who I would never work with because their personality was not simply one worth working with.
Right.
Or they didn't have ethics at all. So it really is a case-by-case basis. And we basically look at people's experiences. I don't find that most people are going to make something up just to please me, especially when they don't want their neighbors or even their spouses to know about the experience.
Exonation, Lloyd Auerbach is my special guest, and the world of the science of parapsychology is one of the most upcoming sciences, in my opinion, Lloyd. And you're listening to us here tonight on the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario on Classic 1220. Lloyd, what are some of the commonly used methods or techniques in parapsychological investigations?
Well, if you're talking about laboratory research, the two most, I wouldn't say common, but two most successful methodologies used are what we call the Gansfeld technique, which involves a mild sensory deprivation of the receiver, the person who's going to pull the information. And the other one is remote viewing, which has had enormous success in the military program, the Stargate program, but also has been applied in a lot of very specific ways with success in law enforcement, in corporate work, and other areas as well. Then there are some other areas of research. So, for example, with mediumship, there's a lot of research going on with what's happening in their brains at the time that they're communicating with spirits versus when they're not, and looking at brainwave patterns and other things in brain activity. So we are working with neuroscientists and other folks to see what's happening when people are having these experiences.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
What challenges do parapsychologists face in terms of credibility and acceptance within the scientific community?
Well, here in North America, it's a little different in the UK for the most part, but in North America, and especially in the United States, the skeptics organizations have had a dramatic effect on making it difficult for people in academia and mainstream science to even express their interest in the subject, except maybe in a one-on-one conversation with one of us. This goes back to the 1970s. And it's very difficult to have this conversation in any academic setting in general. But we are now more and more, because more and more researchers, scientists in a variety of fields of study are getting interested in the question about what consciousness is. We are a field that studies consciousness. We study effects of consciousness directly. We're not, in some respects, parapsychology is on the side of psychology, because psychology studies behavior and their various models of the mind without looking at the greater idea of what consciousness is, what actually causes the mind, for example. So that's something that we're interested in, and we provide research in that area. And we're getting some more inroads in cooperation with various researchers in other fields. But for the most part, we hear in academic world that people either don't want to be bothered with us, or they think it's all pseudoscience because they get the message of the skeptics. They're not really skeptics. We like to call them pseudo-skeptics. Or they're just simply afraid. We have some implications that are kind of scary to people.
Such as?
Well, for psychologists, think about this for a second. If people can actually pick up information without saying or observing with their normal senses, maybe, like what happened with Carl Jung, people might pick up things on the therapist, on the psychologist. Carl Jung wrote about that quite a bit, about his clients sometimes talking about what was in his mind or what was going on with them. So that's a little bit daunting, I think, for psychology.
It certainly shows that communication is truly a two-way street, receiving and transmitting. Lloyd, stand by. We've got to take our break. Exonation, our guest this hour is Lloyd Auerbach. And if you'd like to find out more about Lloyd, or maybe you'd like to contact him, there's two websites. Right now, his website is under construction, but there's the Rhine.org website, Rhine.org, that's RHINE.org, and for Forever Friendly Foundation, or
Forever Family Foundation.
Family Foundation. Can't even read my own writing at times. Exonation, this is the Exxon. We're coming to you from the studios of Classic 1220, and we're streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. I'm Rob McConnell. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Let it shine, shine, shine.
Hi, Rob McConnell and all of your crew. This is Georgina Cannon from the Ontario Hypnosis Center, Clinic and School, and wishing you and yours the best year ever. And to remember to celebrate World Hypnosis Day on January the 4th. Get all of those changes in line and make it happen for yourself. Happy New Year.
Waiting for so long for a miracle to come. Everyone told me to be strong. Hold on and don't shed a tear through the darkness.
Welcome back. This is the X-Zone, and we're coming to you from the Broadcast Center and Studios in St. Catharines on Classic 1220. streaming around the world at classic1220.ca. Lloyd Auerbach is my special guest. And Lloyd, how do you describe, or what is your description of consciousness?
It is that thing that makes us us. It is, we can call it consciousness is mind, spirit. It is everything that is you in terms of intellect, emotion, and interactivity.
Are there any ethical considerations or guidelines that a parapsychologist needs to follow in their research?
Yeah, like with any science research, if you're doing laboratory research, you usually work for the Institutional Review Board to make sure that you're treating the participants in an ethical way and safely as well. In fact, at the Rhine Center, the executive director there, John Kruth, and I co-teach a course on ethics and field investigation, kind of applying the idea of the Institutional Review Board to specific types of investigations and when you might not need it. But the underscoring piece there is that we need to treat people with respect and in a way that's safe for them and for us. And that, by the way, goes also for the ghosts, if we might run it in.
To what extent, Lloyd, do you think that cultural beliefs and superstitions influence parapsychology as well as the parapsychological phenomena?
Well, they really influence, for the most part, the interpretation of the experiences people actually have. But looking at this from worldwide, from a cross-cultural perspective, you find that different cultures have different, rankings of things. So some things that we might consider weird in our culture, like moving an object with your mind, in another culture might be a very normal thing. Whereas the idea that we might be able to get any information from the future would be only limited to a very specific...
I'm sorry, go on.
Sorry about that. All right. It would only be limited to a very specific type of person, like a magic wielder or shaman or somebody else in another culture. In reincarnation, we talked about reincarnation before. So in some cultures, you can only be reincarnated in the direct family line according to the beliefs of that culture. But in many other cultures, you are not allowed to be reincarnated in the direct family line. So by belief. And of course, what we find is that in these various cultures that have rules of what happens and what doesn't happen, we see reports that match what happens, what doesn't happen. So in other words, we get only reports or mainly reports of the things that are allowed to happen by those culturally set rules. And it's really impossible at this point to know whether the rules shape the experiences because of people's belief,
right,
or that people are not reporting things because it wouldn't fit the accepted kinds of experiences.
Can you provide us with some examples, Lloyd, of noteworthy psychics or mediums whose abilities have been studied in parapsychology and that you say, wow, they're legit?
Well, we can go back in time a little bit to a very well-known medium in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, Eileen Garrett, who was studied by a number of researchers and actually was never... unlike a lot of the skeptics going after people today or for the last 30, 40 years, she was never even criticized for her abilities. She actually took all the money that she made and funneled it into the Parapsychology Foundation, the educational foundation. So she was one. Ingo Swann, who came to fame because of the Stargate program, the military program, actually was a well-known research subject for out-of-body experience and eventually for remote viewing. So he was in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s as well. And he actually came up with the basic method for remote viewing that was used originally by Targan Putoff and the folks that they trained, that they worked with. Another one I can mention is Alex Tanis, for whom the Rhine Research Center's library is named, for the Tanis Foundation supports the Rhine Center to some extent. And I knew Alex, and Alex was our out-of-body experience subject at the American Society for Psychical Research when I worked there, actually from around the mid-70s to the mid-80s. I was only involved from the education department perspective, but I got to know Alex very well. And not only did Alex do fairly well in the research, but he was consulted quite a bit by Bellevue Hospital with cancer patients for healing purposes or diagnostic purposes, so medical intuitive perspectives, and studied by them. And I will also say that when I worked at the ASPR back in the early 80s, every time Alex was visiting, which was every other week he came down from Maine to do the research, he was also visited by somebody from NYPD, Boston PD, Philadelphia Police Department, the FBI. Some law enforcement folks were always consulting with him. And you never heard about that because he was asked not to talk about it.
Right.
And then I can mention my late friend Annette Martin, who you knew.
Yes.
Who did research on being as a medical intuitive, diagnosing patients at a hospital, working with a medical doctor in San Jose. And she did some other kinds of research as well as a subject. And then these days, the folks who are the research certified mediums for the Windbridge Research Center, which is windbridge.org, they went through a lengthy process to be vetted and to make sure that they could perform under the most stringent controls of knowing nothing about who they were supposed to contact other than a first name. Along with that, the mediums for the Forever Family Foundation, our certification process is also a science-based process to eliminate any possibility that these folks would have gotten any additional information from somewhere else or been using cold reading. And I'll tell you that less than 10% of the folks who try that certification pass.
Really? How do parapsychologists like yourself account for skeptics' viewpoints and skepticism in general?
Well, skepticism is good. I mean, real skepticism is a good thing. That may mean that you don't make up your mind, but at least you look at the evidence, or you basically say, I don't care. That would be a more honest way to approach it. Most of the folks who call themselves skeptics are not really skeptics. They are disbelievers, or at least lean in that direction. And it may not be for all the phenomena, but they, accounting for it, well, a lot of them are pure materialists. They look at the world through the eyes of materialist philosophy, which is unfortunately the basis of most of our physical sciences, certainly, and even bleeds over into social science quite a bit. For that perspective, you can't even fathom how there could be consciousness without the body, or consciousness going beyond the body, or even picking up information without the use of the normal senses. So, it's a belief thing. And in some respect, I have to tell you that I've met people who are true believers. I've met people who are religious folks who are not happy with what we do because they say we're doing the work of the devil. And I've met some of the pseudo-skeptics who totally disbelieve in all of this. And I will say that they're all pretty much the same. Their belief level it's faith.
Really?
It's faith that this doesn't exist.
Are there any ongoing collaborative efforts between parapsychologists like yourself and other scientific disciplines?
Well, yeah. I mean, we have, first of all, the Parapsychological Association and folks who do research in the field. Because there really aren't any degree programs. Well, I take that back. There's a couple of degree programs these days. The University of Edinburgh has a program which gives PhDs with an emphasis on parapsychology within their psychology department. But you find that in our field, we have physicists, we have anthropologists, we have a lot of psychology degree or backgrounds, we have biologists, neuroscientists. Parapsychology in many respects is an interdisciplinary study and an interdisciplinary science. Almost every physical and social science can be brought in, and we do want to do that. We want to have that kind of crosstalk, and very often we have some discussion at the Parapsychological Association conventions that have either a physics facet, a neuroscience facet, psychology. It brings it all in, brings it all together.
In your opinion, Lloyd, what are some of the potential applications or practical uses of parapsychology research?
Well, for one thing, the research is giving us an idea of the kind of person who might be more psychic or able to access these abilities So we're going to step away from survival of bodily death for a minute.
Okay.
With ESP and PK, on a healing perspective, there's a potential for aiding the healing of an individual. We don't necessarily know that a healer comes in and forces healing on someone. It doesn't seem to work that way. But healing would be one aspect of things. Certainly on the ESP front, everything from finding lost people, finding dead bodies, which, we're talking about the law enforcement applications, but search and rescue. I mean, I think that is an untapped area in many respects because people don't want to consult someone on that. So search and rescue is one. There have been many applications of remote viewing for psychic spying, for espionage. I'm a co-author of a book called ESP Wars, East and West, about the history of our government's program, but also the history of the Russian programs as well. And there's a lot in there about the application. And it's not just psychic spying, it's also finding people, finding things. As much as people, and I'll say that Uri Geller is kind of a controversial figure. I like to think that he's still saying what he did when I asked him years ago if he was a psychic, and he said, "Oh, I'm an entertainer. Everybody's psychic." So if that gives you an idea. But Uri made his money finding oil wells and mineral deposits. And he loved to say, if that was dumb luck, then I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Yeah, I remember having him on the show many times in years gone by. And the last show he was on, he told us that he had actually been an intelligence agent, and that he would walk by certain areas that the intelligence community would ask him to go by to see where the Russians were actually located in different cities with their intelligence gathering equipment as well as their agents.
Well, I mean, that certainly fits with what was done with the Stargate program.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that is really interesting about that program, because here we again have the skeptics saying that there was no success in that program. The actual report that came out that came to that conclusion was only looking at the last year and a half of the program, when they were pretty much not given any tasks at all by the CIA. And in fact, we have it on very good authority from the guy who actually sealed up the top secret classified boxes to send to Washington for that assessment, that when he checked after the report came out, those boxes were still sealed.
Really?
So they never looked at the reports. Ed May, who's the program director for many years, his point was over, I think it was 17 out of 21
Lloyd, I'm going to have to cut you off here, my friend, because I've got to take my break. X-Zone Nation, Lloyd Auerbach and I will be back with you on the other side of this break, and you're listening to the X-Zone Radio Show on Classic 1220, classic1220.ca.
Greetings, everyone. It's Craig Webb here, Executive Director of the Dreams Foundation, online at www.dreams.ca, and just really wanted to send out great blessings for Rob McConnell and all the listeners and viewers of the worldwide X-Zone Nation for a happy Hanukkah, a Merry Christmas, and a soulful solstice. And with that in mind, may you really connect with your soul and the deepest dreams of your spirit and bring them forth in 2011 for a true experience of lucid living. Blessings to all.
Turn on the brightest string of lights we've ever seen. Slice up the fruitcake. She's tiny hung some tinsel. We're playing those mind games together, pushing the barrier, planting seeds, playing the mind area, catching the mantra, peace on earth.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from your hometown radio, Classic 1220. and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. Lloyd Auerbach is our special guest this hour. If you'd like to check out a couple of websites, foreverfamilyfoundation.org and ryan.org. And as always, Lloyd, thank you so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure talking to you. Dreams. Where do dreams fit in the world of parapsychology?
Well, dreams, like any other form of altered state of consciousness or even our normal state, are a fertile platform for people to have psychic experiences. And in some respects, probably more fertile than our waking state. Kind of in the dream state, all bets are off.
Mm-hmm.
The rules don't really apply. And our biases, while they might come out in metaphor, our beliefs, psychic information can bleed through very easily. I wrote about this in my book, Psychic Dreaming, which is still available. So they're really, it's the kind of thing that when people have a psychic dream, they know it was different. They remember it better, and it really feels very different to them than the average dream.
Where does the other aspects of the paranormal fit into the world of parapsychology? For example, ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs. Is there any place in parapsychology for these classifications?
Well, ghosts, or what we call apparitions, the idea that a consciousness survives the death of the body. So that falls under survival of bodily death. And,
right.
Indirectly, that idea fits right in, because if you're without a body, the only way you can perceive the world is if you have non-sensory perception. So that's ESP. Hauntings are something connected to the environment that we as living people pick up. We're picking up some history of some kind that's imprinted somehow in the environment, or the environment is kind of the trigger for it in some respects. But things like Bigfoot, if Bigfoot's psychic, then I guess it would fit in. Or if UFOs are a psychic projection, they would fit in. But they don't otherwise fall into our field at all.
Do you believe that parapsychology has the potential to revolutionize the understanding of the universe?
I think it maybe not revolutionize so much, because so many people do kind of accept or believe, even if they don't like to admit it publicly. It certainly would revolutionize our understanding of who we are as human beings, our potential, and it would add to or tweak, it wouldn't cancel out the laws of physics, because we don't think that there's anything non-physical about what we can do as when you're psychic. It just would add to how information is transferred, might even give some ideas of some really interesting technology that could come up mimicking psychic perceptions in some respects.
That was going to be part of my next question. Has the rise of technology had an impact on parapsychological research in recent years?
Well, it certainly helped us in the lab, because you could automate all the random selection of targets. The whole process, you can remove human beings so that there's no question as to whether or not somebody's cheating in that way. So that certainly helped. The data analysis, all the technologies help with that. I think the next step would be if we can apply AI to all of our data to look for the patterns more deeply. In the investigation world, environmental sensors are what we started using, and those have gotten smaller and cheaper. But unfortunately, we also see in the ghost hunting world that there's a lot of people who are claiming all sorts of things about these devices and what they can do, and selling them for a big price to a lot of, I won't call them gullible, but expectant ghost hunters. There are no devices that can detect anything psychic, that can detect consciousness directly. There are no devices that can detect ghosts.
But what about these what do they call it, spirit boxes?
Yeah, those are supposedly random scanners that stop and give you a message. Where the idea is that spirits are interacting with them to create the message. First of all, if you actually pay attention to any of those sessions, for the most part, the person who is using it is interpreting and trying to make fit what they hear directly to the question, if they even asked a question. The bigger problem, though, for anything like the spirit boxes or EVP or anything else, is that we have laboratory evidence that shows that living people can affect technology. We can affect technology in a negative way, sometimes in a positive way, under controlled conditions, and certainly we can affect random systems. if a living person can do that,
Mm-hmm.
especially by expectation and intent, then what's to say that all of this stuff that ghost hunters are picking up is not coming from them?
True. A lot of people believe that EVPs are proof beyond the shadow of a doubt that the spirits can communicate. I have a problem with that because, well, being in this business, I find it very hard to understand how you ask a question, and let's say you're using a digital recorder. You leave it blank for a couple of minutes or seconds, whatever they want to use as criteria, and miraculously, a voice is heard. What's your contact? Only when the message is played back, so it's
Right.
not heard at the time of transmission or recording on the device. It makes no sense to me.
Well, first of all, it's not an acoustical sound that's being recorded. The very definition of electronic voice phenomena is that the voice is created electronically in the device. So that's, by definition, psychokinesis, mind over matter. The question then becomes, is it the expectation of the operator who might be doing that, or is it a spirit that might or might not be there? Because for the most part, I don't hear from or find that the ghost hunters who are at these places actually have any indication other than that EVP that there's even a ghost present. And they're making that assumption from what they hear. And of course, most of those so-called voices are unintelligible or interpreted with a bias as well. There have been some interesting recordings made with the microphone disabled, which is very interesting, both with audio tape and going back decades, and also with digital audio recorders. And that's when you get into a whole different level.
Are there any specific environmental factors, Lloyd, that can actually influence paranormal experiences?
Yeah, we found that there's a correlation between the Earth's magnetic field and on a local level and human beings in general and our psychic performance. Michael Persinger was a researcher at Laurentian University, and he was looking at geomagnetic fields and how they influence the migration patterns of animals and birds. And then he started looking into other fields of science and found that there were correlations to not only laboratory work, but also to people's psychic experience that were reported. If they were reported with a location and a date and a time, there were some really interesting patterns that emerged there. So it may very well be that the shifts, because the Earth's magnetic field is not completely steady anywhere you are, it shifts, and that seems to be affecting our brains. In fact, Serena Roney-Dougal, a researcher over in the UK, has pointed at geomagnetic effects on the pineal gland, which regulates, among other things, the production of serotonin and melatonin in the body. And that affects our body clock and a lot of other things.
Are there any specific age groups or demographics that appear to be more susceptible to paranormal experiences, Lloyd?
Well, I will say that there was, after the lockdowns here in the United States, there were 2 real estate companies that did surveys because people were reporting that their houses were haunted. And the surveys were looking at what they thought was going on that made them think their houses were haunted. In fact, the numbers of people, based on the survey that they found, the percentage was a huge leap over any previous survey that had ever been done. And then they broke it down by age. And it looked like the Gen Z, the younger folks, really were in the high percentage of thinking their house was haunted. The realty associations actually in that survey, as they kind of assessed it, they considered a couple things, one of which was, exposure to more paranormal stuff on TV, pop culture, and that's definitely younger folks. But more importantly, all of it came down to, and we knew this in our field, that you're trapped in your house for 24 hours a day for weeks on end. You've never done that before. You didn't know what noises your house actually makes. And there was a lot of assumption those were paranormal activities.
We're coming down to the final couple of minutes of the show, Lloyd. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure talking to you. And what advice would you give to someone who's interested in pursuing a career in parapsychology?
I'd say have a source of income other than the field. Yeah, unfortunately, there's very, very little funding coming into the field. It's been that way for a number of years. We've been very fortunate at the Rhine Center recently to have some large donations and some help from a couple of other aspects. So we're doing finally fairly well. But the research itself, there's not a huge amount of money. There's almost no money to support actually field investigations, field work. So it really is helpful to have some other source of income to support that work you might be doing as well.
Where should people?
Yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I say, but there are now educational opportunities like the courses we offer at the Rhine Center. There are online courses for people that get educated. While there are not any academic programs in the United States, there are some courses here and there. There are a couple academic programs over in the UK. So there are ways to finagle your way into the field, even if you are just a student learning. In fact, that's the best way.
We've got about a minute left before we have to say so long. So what are your final thoughts for the X Zone Nation tonight?
Just that what we're talking about in our field has serious implications for who we are as human beings, that we have more potential. We're holding ourselves back by not studying these experiences. And maybe there is another explanation for these experiences, but even that will tell us more about who we are as human beings.
Lloyd, I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure. And X Zone Nation, if you'd like to find out more about Lloyd, here's two websites. Right now, his personal website is under construction, I believe. But if you'd like to find out more about Lloyd and the work that he does, foreverfamilyfoundation.org and ryan.org. Lloyd, to you and yours, a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, sir.
Thanks. Happy holidays, Rob.
Take care, my friend. And another night of the X Zone here on Classic 1220 has come to an end. Lloyd Auerbach has been our guest this hour. And if you'd like to contact Lloyd, visit www.ryan.org. That's RHINE.org. And the foreverfamilyfoundation.org. This is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And we come to you right here Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern from your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and stream around the world on classic1220.ca. So until tomorrow night, I am Rob McConnell, reminding each and every one of you to always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.